Nice. Although I probably won't listen to it because I don't like hearing my own voice recorded. So thank you very much for that. With that, just a brief synopsis. We try and send a lot of our updates, at least somewhat regularly, without filling up your inboxes via MailChimp. And so I hope that you see those. And if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to ask myself or any of the others on the committee. Our committee is kind of a neat thing that our committee has grown, not just with IAVAT members, but we've definitely expanded with the number of IAVAT secondary teachers that are on the committee now, and really excited for that and a lot of outstanding input. Also have other members from across the Ag Ed community and across career and technical education community that are being a part of these committees. If you want a more detailed breakdown of it, I'm happy to do that. There are some of them that are ex officio, so to speak, as well as more of the true committee members, but I'm really excited, and we do have a legislative subcommittee call next week to kind of get an update and go through some other things and keep moving forward with that. If you'd like to be a part of that, please send me an email. I'd be happy to include you on that, and it's definitely an open committee that we'd love participation from anyone. So please, at any time, if you ever want to, please send me an email for that. As we go through just a couple of the happenings with our with the legislative effort, obviously one of the ones on the forefront, and I had a meeting with my administrators today about it as well, is the three-circle FFA and SAE grant. We're very proud of that legislation getting signed in 2016, and then just ecstatic about the level of funding we received for it here in 2017, and hopefully getting a number of teachers into the program and doing everything that we can at the state level to help support that. To be very realistic, as we sat down, I recall sitting there with several of the members of the subcommittee, and I'll speak for myself on this. I know there's a number of challenges that different districts face in implementation, and so my sincerest hope is that as we look at this program and the sustainability and continuation of it, is that at the 5-year mark of implementation that we'll be able to have every teacher in school that would like to be a part of the program included. So as I say that, I think that we set that in a realistic fashion, and we're committed to providing that support to get us there. We also have the LEAP program, and I'm going to turn it over to Jake in just a little bit here to talk a little bit about the LEAP program and the continued advocacy effort of partnering our agriculture programs with legislators, and a few of the things that we've learned as that's come together and still in process of happening. We also are going to talk for a moment about our Ag Ed 365 initiative to help support the advocacy fund, and there's also been several other pieces of legislation we're very proud of. They've gone out in different listservs. If you have questions on those, I won't go into detail on those unless we do have questions, but happy about some of those as well. And I guess the other part that I'll start with is more of just, it made me smile. I was reading the Farm Week here this week and saw the teachers that have been included in the Illinois, the IAA and Foundation that have been a part of being the initial grant recipients for the IAA Foundation program. And I believe that's truly growing out of the partnerships that we've helped create since beginning the legislative efforts with Jake. Any questions at this point, or I can just go into the questions that I have here that have been submitted so far. So with that, the very first question that I received was, is there any plans to help ag teachers collecting extra pay who are in their last 4 years, who are up against the 6% from TRS and that potential penalty? There's always a great deal of interest to help any and all of our teachers, and we understand that there are some challenges with the implementation for those teachers who are approaching the last few years as they go into retirement with TRS. We're always interested in continuing to look at programs. If you have any specific on that, be very much interested to hear, but even more so interested to invite you to attend, to join our legislative call next week so that we can look a little bit more specifically at what we could do to help include those. What I will say, as far as in this initial grant program, is any teacher who is currently receiving a 12-month contract, their school district will be able to apply for that grant without penalty, as it will be within that their 6%. For those that were perhaps that becomes more challenging, and right now there's just no legislative appetite for making any adjustments, and I don't see any changes to TRS coming in the near future, at least in regards to this and that 6%. So if you have additional thoughts or input on that or possible solutions, I definitely am, or even more so, I'd love to invite you to our legislative call next week. So I'll take a moment if there's anyone that has anything further on that.
Jesse, this is Dean. Your note there about your legislative call next week, is that different than today?
Yeah, next week is the legislative committee. The subcommittee has their call scheduled for next week. For those that are members on here, I'm planning to send out an agenda at the end of the week. We set that date at our October meeting.
And that will be a conference call as well?
Yes.
And who is on that legislative committee?
That's the list. So to go through it, and I'm going to forget a few names, particularly from some of our partner organizations. But from an IAVAT perspective, there's Lisa Ulrich from Scales Mound in District 1, Jeff Meyerhofer from Seneca, Brandy Burgess from Sycamore, Ryan Robinson from Burlington Central.
I was thinking that today was the same as that, but that's not the case then. This is just kind of...
No, this is a statewide question and answer on any of the things that committee has been working on or is going to work on moving forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, this was the idea behind this was, with the number of questions we're receiving, is wanting to open up and give a chance to talk and make ourselves available in a statewide platform here. Any other questions at the moment? The next is more of a request, and I'll read it. I'll read it word for word here. Glad that we have recommended hours. I'll skip a couple of numbers. Hours for each of the 3 circles. Though I would suggest a required number of hours for these 3 areas, especially for SAE, as this is our weakest circle. Understand that required might be difficult to enforce, though let's place the language there anyway to allow school districts and ag teachers to have these discussions. And if not, then we may not get the full impact of the grant of the intention and goal.
Hi, it's Jake Butcher.
Oh, thanks, Jake. On that one, in regards to the hours, they are listed within the rules of the grant as far as recommended. Understanding a lot of challenges that face a lot of unique situations, and also a challenge in putting any type of enforceable, the enforceable side, we would be very clear. Our intention is to enhance agriculture education programs, and that includes the FFA and SAE components both. As a group, and also I know, and I speak very, very sincerely on this as myself, is that if we're establishing and helping to promote agriculture educators receiving the extended pay that we believe they do deserve, is that we do expect to have all 3 circles implemented on a high level within their programs. Those hours, and as we go through it, there will be a document to help teachers log their hours, as well as some suggestions in future professional development as far as what we can do to help build those programs in places where they might be slightly weaker. However, currently those hours are listed as recommendations, as opposed to being as recommendations to help promote that, not necessarily required for eligibility on the grant. However, I believe there will be some oversight. There is oversight, and there is intention. I believe the words Harley used is that there needs to be some, if those recommendations aren't met, there will be some follow-up that goes along with that. One component of note that I will specify is that with that, the total hours, what is required is that there is a log of 400 hours, and those hours are outside of what of the contractual school day or of the school day. Could be before school, could be after school, evenings, Saturdays, as well as summer or other breaks, but things outside of the school day. And to use an example, in National Convention, if you're on a National Convention, the time that you would typically be in school would not be considered part of those 400 hours. However, once that, in my particular case, my school requires 7:45 to 3:30, so the time that I'm at National Convention, during that window, that's not considered part of the 400 hours, but the additional time that I'm at National Convention would be. So make sure, and hopefully you're logging those. One of the questions has to do with the AET that we're going to come to, but please make sure that you're logging those hours and understand that we tried to add a lot of flexibility in those hours to meet the vast different needs of ag programs and agriculture teachers in our state. Any other thoughts on those at the moment? The next one that I have is I'm going to paraphrase because it has to do with the match. Per the legislation, it's a match where the school district is required to match 50%, as well as the state grant will match 50% of the full amount. That's in the legislation, and therefore that's not that can't be altered without future legislation. So right now and also for the foreseeable future, unless we want to bring a big push to the legislative committee, that number is set in stone. The changes to that are for the only alterations to that are for programs that are new and new or will be new in the future, with the idea that as we open new programs, we want to use a little bit of extra incentive to help those programs not just open up, offer agriculture classes, but fully embrace the three-circle model and be able to help support them in doing so. So there is a step up for those that are new or new in the future in order to do that. Any questions or additional thoughts on that particular line or that particular topic?
Jesse, this is Dean. I was just wondering, you seem rigid on the changing of the legislation, and I'm just wondering, not necessarily on that issue, but I'm just wondering why you seem the tone or your rigidness on any changes at this point.
Not tone. So I apologize if that's how it came across. Not necessarily supposed to be there, and I don't want to infer that tone. The challenge is that the legislation, in order to change the legislation, it has to go back through the full legislative process. Committees, then chambers, then through the governor's office as well. As we went through that process, and so when I say that, it's a challenging scenario, that's what the undertaking is. I want to be clear on what those steps have to be. If that's the direction that we want to go as an organization and with and as an entity of ag education, that we don't want the schools to have, that we don't want what's written in that legislation, then we have to go back through the legislative process. And the hesitation that and so this is not, and I want to be clear, not necessarily the rigidness, but hesitation that I would offer is that by doing that, then we're utilizing a lot of the a lot of the capital and relationships to change legislation that we asked for in the first place. Not that it can't be done, and I'm not even saying that it shouldn't be done. I'm saying that's something that we have to understand if we are going to do that.
On the flip side, as you well know, and I know we don't have those details yet until after the intents are in, but it could be a red flag on the other end too. And again, I don't know what those cards are. We don't know, what the intents are going to be either. But it could be a potential red flag that there's a lot of money that's not used for the intent.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I kind of feel we're in a catch-22 situation.
I think that's, and I guess that's part of that review that will come. So absolutely, 100% agree with that. With that as we look at the programs that come in, and yeah, completely agree.
I would add too. I know the legislation says 50-50, but right now it says in order to get the 50-50, you have to be a minimum of a 10.5. And that might be something that people run into. Like I know in my own instance, I'm just shy, I think it's like $400 shy of the equivalent of a 10.5 month contract when you add my stipend and contract together. And you're going to really kind of alienate a lot of people, and basically they won't be able to apply for it because they don't meet the minimum requirement, which goes back to we have this extra money that we're not able to, to utilize it for a grant that we want a lot of people to sign up for.
Absolutely. I do hope, and one of the things that we change or that have been unfortunately worded in the FAQs is that it, and I know that each district is a little bit different in how they handle it, is that it did not, for instance, you didn't have to be on a 10.5 month or greater last year in order to be able to apply for the grant for this year. And so I do want to clarify there was a couple of confusions on that, but the school will need to find a way to meet, or the district will need to find a way to meet that 50% matching for what we've got. So that is acknowledged and would agree. But you did not have to be on it last year in order to qualify to apply for it now.
So Jesse, here's a question for you. Could you, still using that 50-50 match, and I don't know exactly how it's worded in the legislation, but could you in the future change it to, let's say, if your district's offering you the equivalent of a 10-month contract, that they would match the 50%, getting you up to 11 months? Could that still be a possibility in the future without going into the full legislative process of making changes?
No, that part is, the legislation specifically states that it needs to be the equivalent pay of a 12-month, and that both the local district and the grant would match 50-50 on it. So in order to make that change, would have to go back through the legislative process.
Okay.
But good question. Yeah. Any other questions on that topic? The next question has to do with the system for reporting hours in the AET. Right now, in the AET, we've worked very closely with Dr. Hannegriff on that, and he has made some changes, both categorizing as well as adding a couple of extra entry points on the AET or teacher tracker. I did talk to him at National Convention, and I haven't been in it this week to check. One of the things that I noticed was, personally, I had done a link of where I linked it to the home page on my Android, and so I just click and it takes me right to the teacher tracker to enter my hours. Some of those additional categories are not on that mobile version yet, and he's looking into those. So if you notice that, that's something we are going to change, and it does help. And so I would offer this to, as you're entering as you enter your activity, because it's unclear at this point how specific we're going to need to be in terms of time. But as you're entering your activities, it might be helpful to, even if you have, for instance, an officer meeting before school, to just put AM or make some type of abbreviation for before school versus after school versus weekend. I would encourage you to do so. There seems to be a little bit of uncertainty on that at this point still. I'm not sure if that's going to become an issue. Just for the ease sake of logging those hours, I would encourage you to at least have some form of abbreviation just as you enter each activity of kind of an AM, a PM, or a weekend type acknowledgement or off day type acknowledgement. And so I would encourage you to consider that as you enter. We do want, and this is more from the legislative subcommittee side of it, we would really like for everyone to be using the AET to track their hours. That's going to allow for an easy summary at the end. It's unclear at this point if you will have to pull your own information from the summary and enter it into the ISBE stuff, but it'll just be the summary information, or if they'll be able to pull directly from the AET. But from our end, for reporting and and for us to continue to support this, our best reports can be pulled from the AET. We can pull state reports that do summaries of hours and summaries of impact. We can pull those directly from the AET that then we can utilize as we go to budget hearings, as we go to committee meetings, and as we go to various meetings with legislators. So I am going to implore that please, if you're not currently logging hours, or if you talk to others, if you're not currently logging hours in the AET teacher tracker, I would sure like for you to start doing that and to transition into that. So that we can, and that will streamline the process from to categorize and to sort and to truly identify the impact in order for us to continue to advocate this and keep this grant a reality and long-term solution to address Illinois Ag-Ed. So I'll throw that on from the AET side. Any questions on that? Oh, and the final is your school does not have to be using the AET for you to have access to the teacher tracker. You do not need to have the subscription in order to have access to the teacher tracker yourself.
Jesse, this is Dean. You mentioned AM and PM and weekend. I believe that's a good start, but what would be wrong with going the extra mile and actually recommending that we put a start time and an end time in the narrative portion of AET?
I love that suggestion, Dean. I'm great with that. I think that's.
Did Roger was that request actually made to Roger about maybe adding that as for the entire system or not? Or do we need to maybe ask him to do that if he would?
It's been requested, but that was one that created hesitation on the programming side of entering that's a separate function of putting the clock in there, putting the clock part.
I see. Okay.
Any other thoughts on that one? Jess, you said that you had another one that had come in?
Yeah, so it's very similar to your question number 2 that you already addressed, but I'll go ahead and read that for you if that's all right.
That'd be great.
All right, so this is a question that we received. I don't have a name from who it was sent by, but it says, was it ever considered to have the 3-circle grant simply match whatever additional district-funded compensation on top of the 9-month contract instead of requiring it to equal a 10.5-month contract? Several teachers in my area can't get 10.5 equivalent, but have a 10 or 9.5 currently disqualified because their district is unwilling to help them get to the equivalent of a 10.5. If we want this grant to be for the masses, it would make sense to match what districts are currently doing. Otherwise, we risk having very little participation in the grant. It looks bad not to use all the money for what it was intended for. So I think it was kind of addressed previously, but I went ahead and stated that.
I guess we've gone through a lot of that, and there was great discussion and several different developments or different pieces that were put together on what this would look like. And what we ended up with in the legislation was through some recommendations of processes into as well as looking at what was going to be both functional as well as effective. This is where the committee and the members of the committee ended up. But it was not. I guess the one point is, lots of components of it were considered as we did that. If you would like more detail on that, I'd be happy to entertain any specific questions as to any of the rationale as we went through different options.
Jesse, so this is Ryan. I just want to make sure that, you mentioned earlier that the goal was by year 5 to have as much participation as possible or close to 100%. What happens, I guess, from a legislative standpoint and kind of, I guess them looking at our grant if it's only 25% funded or 40% funded, at max because of this 50-50 match thing that we had built in to the legislation. Do you think that's going to hurt us negatively? Do you think that would be a time then we would look at to maybe adjust that wording? Or, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
I think that, and this is just speaking from the personal side, and this also I'll let Jake is with us, and so I'll let him offer some of his thoughts from the legislative side of this. I think that we have to be in consistent evaluation and review of not only what of what we're doing at the same time that we're looking forward to try and continue to do things that are beneficial for Ag Ed. I don't disagree with. I guess I don't. On a personal note, I don't disagree from some of the different scenarios that could be posed, and I think that we have to be in constant evaluation of it also. So I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I think as we get numbers in, I'm pretty sure, and from the numbers I remember hearing last week, is that as of last week, out of our 405 teachers, there were 67 of them that had already filled out the paperwork. From what I learned today, I know both myself and my colleague that we teach there, that our school has submitted the application as of today. At least I think. They had it filled out. I don't know if they've hit send yet. So I know that those numbers are going up. On our utilizing the FK data is that there was about 180 teachers last year that had what was identified as a 10.5 or greater. And so those should be the teachers that we kind of, as far as some early adopters to where the schools shouldn't necessarily have to come up with more funding themselves, and just kind of starting to see as they roll in with the hope that this does support full funding for all ag teachers. At the same time, please do not interpret that as saying that we're just gonna ride this out if it seems like we're having problems with implementation. I think we have to be in constant consideration and evaluation and review of what can we do to continue to make it better to serve all of Illinois Ag Ed.
I guess a kind of follow-up question. This might be for Jake too. Then, Jake, what's your perspective on, if we had to change these and go through the legislative process, does that kind of give us almost like a black eye in the viewpoint from these legislators that are going back, hey, you just made this not too long ago, and all of a sudden you want to change it and lessen kind of the requirements? Do you think that would kind of be the viewpoint that they would have, or do you still think that they would see kind of a positive light, with this, and that we're trying to just get as many people as possible to be impacted by that? Jake not on the conference call anymore?
Well, he was.
Okay.
He was. I'm not. So. Okay. We'll see if we get him back. And Jess, and I'd send it. Jess, can you shoot Jake a text and see if he can join back on?
Yes, we'll do.
All right, thank you. So Ryan, we'll try and get an answer to that, and hopefully he can join back with us. Any other pieces on that or other topics at the moment? There's just a couple other points that I do want to touch on here shortly. Another one of the topics, and a number of you have seen emails or seen messages from me or some of the others. The AgEd 365 campaign has been doing a solid job, but we still need to continue to push to help meet our advocacy goals in terms of raising for that fund. I say that we're not quite halfway through the year right now. A lot of pledges out there. There were some invoices sent, and when I say this, I know that I've received just a couple of negative feedbacks on the invoices. There were a number of people who asked us to send invoices and asked for the reminder. We did not do a good job as we distributed pins of identifying who requested an invoice and who did not. And so for everybody who had received a pin, we did send a follow-up invoice to, and I've heard actually more appreciation than I've heard negative on that. But please also acknowledge that. I did send some emails, continue to look for different sources of funding. I appreciate all of those chapters that have made chapter contributions. Appreciate all of the individuals, and obviously the ag teachers, the OK members, the alumni members, the supporters, the staff that have made their individual contributions. Grateful for that, and would encourage and really love seeing section contributions too. I think we've got 4 or 5 section contributions. I'd love to see every section contribute, even for those for those teachers that aren't in a place where they can sponsor at the level of a full pin. Perhaps being able to contribute to a greater section contribution would be something that would be impactful as well. All of it is helpful. Promotion and positivity and is always helpful about promoting the AgEd 365 campaign, and we'll continue working on that as well.
Hi, it's Jake Butcher.
Good to have you back, Jake. I'm gonna toss it back to Ryan. He had a good question about we'll throw it back to him. I say that. Now did we lose Ryan?
Oh, can you? He was on mute.
Oh, there he is.
Now?
Yep, we got you now, Ryan.
So, Jake, the question I had was, with the whole 50-50 match thing, if we, let's say, worst case scenario, I'm just kind of trying to think ahead in the future. If we didn't get as much participation as what we hoped or anticipated 4 or 5 years out from now, how would it look from a legislator's viewpoint if we went back to the drawing board and say, hey, we need to revise this, we need to kind of lessen the requirements so that we have more participation? Would that kind of give us a black eye, or would we still be seen kind of in a positive light that we're trying to, kind of to impact as many people as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think they want to make sure that we retain as many teachers as possible, right? And as everybody on this call knows, I think everybody knows, there was a teacher shortage first of what's going to be 3 to 4 subject matter hearings. yesterday. Now, we're ahead of the ball on this because we've already ran our bill on teacher shortage, and we've got a task force, and so we're moving in that direction on our own. But I don't think that paints us in a negative light if we come back after there's a body of work and say, hey, we need to make some revisions. That happens all the time.
Okay. I just didn't know if we set the goal of the 50-50 match of 10.5 to get to 12, if we lessened it to, let's say, get from 10 to 11, and we allowed that if they would see it as in we're lessening our requirements, we're watering it down, so to speak. So I just want to make sure, kind of get a perspective that we wouldn't be seen in a bad light if we were to do that in the future.
No, I don't think so. Now, I mean, if we lessen it next year, right, that's a different story. So I mean, I think we would have to show a year or two of, body of work, and then come back.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you.
Jake, since I was also at a place where I was going to toss it over to you to kind of give an update on the LEAP program.
Sure. So per my conversation with Jesse this morning, we've confirmed the majority of the LEAP participants. So I will be sending notes to Jesse tonight to line up chapters for specific members along with their requests. So that will be moving forward before Thanksgiving.
One of the things that that we both kind of realized here that I think surprised us. We had, and I say we, Jake had several legislators who we knew them to have really solid ag education involvement within their districts already, where they expressed real interest in being part of the larger program. And so that was we had not originally sent letters out to those that already had. And I think that some of those legislators that expressed that interest do have really good relationships with their chapters already. I think they just wanted it a little more formalized. So for some of you, if you see your legislator on that list and you say, hey, we've already got a relationship, fantastic, and we want to do anything we can to support that. And that was just more of what we saw in that, is I think that the more legislators we have, and I think about my own representative and senators, I feel like our relationship's very good. But including them as part of our greater program, I think, is a perfectly good idea as well, and to maybe kind of include that also. So keep that in mind, and we are going to be leaning on our section advocacy representatives to do our section advocacy representatives to help us collect that information at the very off the bat here to figure out where we've got those relationships already developed and how we can continue to grow with them.
Yeah. And guys, my apologies. We're in veto session today, so I've got to hop off here. Is there any final questions, comments, concerns for me?
Thank you very much, Jake. And you'll be with us for the legislative call next week?
Yes, sir. Yep.
All right. Fantastic.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you, Jake.
Guys. Bye-bye.
And so with that, the final, take it right in the middle. The final piece that I kind of wanted to bring up today, we did with legislation this last session. We established the Ag Education Shortage Task Force. And so this task force, and Jake alluded to it, they've started some hearings on a teacher shortage, a broader spanning teacher shortage issue in Illinois. What I will say is that one of the things that I saw in the notes, received some notes from Nick James, who received them from his administrator today, that for those that were interested in those teaching requirements, is they are seriously looking and said from one of the assistant superintendents, that they are looking that the TAP score requirement will be looking at a reduction in the near term, and so we consider that something that we've been kind of lobbying for a little while. And the task force, we had our first meeting last month. We have another meeting coming up this month. We'll have another one before the first of the year. The task force was established some of the members of the task force are that represent ag education. Jared Hemmer from, I believe, down, and Dean can be more specific with me on which high school he's from, down there in the Metro East area. Jay Solomonson from Orion High School, Deb Cordy from the University of Illinois, Bill Johnson from Joliet Junior College, as well as we have, and I'm Mike Doyle from Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences. I have been a part of that task force call, as well as we have several superintendents, several other principals, administrators, school board members. We have a school board member from West Prairie High School, an administrator from Illini West, an administrator from Spoon River High School, to just name a couple of them, and I forget who I am leaving off, as well as several other representatives of both the State Board of Education, the General Assembly, and educational organizations. So that task force is working with the focus on what can we do and what policy can be there to help address the teacher shortage also.
Jesse, Dean, this is Jared's at Belleville West High School.
Belleville West, thank you very much. Jared is a ag teacher at Belleville West and is on that task force. Thank you, Dean. With that, we've covered the number of topics that were submitted, as well as the topics on the short list. The legislative subcommittee is, I feel blessed to work with a group of people that are extraordinarily committed and interested in looking at advocacy and legislative efforts and what we can do to expand and support and grow and ag education in Illinois, and we look forward to continuing to do that. I do know there's an ILCA meeting, so an Illinois Leadership Council of Ag Education. They're meeting on Thursday. I look forward to hearing from them. For some, there's continued communication every other Friday. It had been every Friday for a while. Now every other Friday, there's representatives from IAVAT, ILCA, as well as the Illinois Committee for Ag Education, IK, and FK, and Jess that have been on a conference call every other Friday, continuing to discuss and move forward what we need to better to improve and support ag education in Illinois, and continue to look forward to serve all of ag education. If there is no additional questions, then I thank all of you for your attendance. I appreciate your participation and your commitment to ag education. And please, with that, I'll give out my email if you would like to be a part of the legislative subcommittee or have any other questions. My email is jfaber, F-A-B-E-R, @pontiac90.org. And if you have any further questions, I can be reached on my cell phone at 815-994-1699. I'm happy to help at any time. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have other concerns or issues that you'd like to bring forward for the legislative subcommittee to look at, we'd be happy to do so. So thank you very much, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.